Session for Monday, April the 21st, 2025. I have a couple of items on our agenda this evening. The first being what we were briefed last week on were some of the vandalism that was occurring in the park. And as Mr. Fearborn told us, there would be a detailed response to that and further discussion on staff action by the Parks Department and the Police Department. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. This evening, and while we're getting this teed up, we're going to want to show you all some videos of the vandalism that we were discussing. We've done our best to try to block out some faces, since we are talking about, in every instance, juveniles here who are involved. But just want to have Mr. Mustine and the chief kind of walk you all through so you can kind of get a flavor of what's going on. Then we're going to talk about some processes and some possible remedies that we're already working on and moving forward on, but did want to start off with this. So the dreaded two-step verification that we have to go through so that we can project.
As we go through these videos this evening, just keep in mind that these are only just a handful of our reports and cases.
Yeah, watch it.
The first video that he's going to bring up, it's titled The Flower Removal. It's going to be dark and hard to see, but you will see some, at about 38 seconds into the video, you'll see a couple folks come in with a flashlight and go over to where the musical flower is located.
This piece of equipment is part of the musical instruments that are at the Hawkridge Park. So we'll, Chief and I will be kind of coming back and forth narrating throughout. So if you have questions, feel free to ask.
So you see the flashlight working up to the flower now. They actually play the flower as they're standing there. But then they hunker down a little bit. You can see them playing right now. And then they squat down.
As a point of reference, because it's dark, you're looking at it as if you were standing at the shelter looking down into the playground. You see the shelter sign right there to your bottom right.
About 1 minute and 3 into this video, you'll see, here in a second, you will see them kind of chuck the flower once, and then they'll pick it up and then walk over and throw it again. So it's free.
And of course, they probably knew that the park wasn't open at this particular point in time.
Yeah, there you go. He's picking it up now, and they got it free, and they're going to go over there and they're going to throw it back around on the other side. You can see him chuck it.
So this piece of equipment has 3 parts. It's like a pedestal with 3 pedals that come out. What they've done is they've pulled and broken off one stem of that percussion instrument.
Go ahead.
Because of that, it's a complete replace, and you can't replace that piece. It has to be the entire part.
The second video here that we're playing is just the next day, where you can see that part that Nathan's explaining what it looked like. The kids are still playing with it.
And the unit actually isn't that light. You're talking about a stainless steel base there. That
The one young man there, he actually kind of plays it again. Broke. But these are not the same kids that broke it.
That particular piece of equipment estimated to replace and to remove and replace is about $6,400 for that piece.
The next video is going to be titled Table Writing. We have some of the other writing blocked out because it has the first and last name of a couple girls, juvenile girls, but you can actually see these 2 individuals. One's just witnessing and the other one's actually writing. So then you see that another young man comes up. So all the people that are observing, they're all going to be witnesses. They're all going to be spoken with once we get everybody identified.
And again, as the chief had indicated, there are a number of names written on the rest of the table, but those are all blocked out in this.
While people are at the park playing.
Right.
Yeah, and it
Right.
gets worse, sir.
So the next one that you're gonna see is, yes, there you go, spray paint table.
So this actually occurred the night after we presented to you all last week. So it just keeps going on and on and on.
So this is after the Parks Department they have already cleaned up the writings. Can you go back to that one again? So it's been cleaned off, there's no, and now this young man's coming in with the paint to spray again. And this is during the day, you see kids playing in the background, so there's 4 kids in there, counting the person that's spraying. Go ahead and go to the next one. So you have the 2 suspects and 2 witnesses. This is a different young man who's trying to spray it on the wall. Can't figure it out. Luckily. But there are 2 witnesses there as well. Go ahead. Same area. Now the very first young man you've seen spraying is going to get up on the table, thinking that his little friend did not know how to use the can. He's going to get up and spray a couple spots on this brick wall. He actually gets it to spray. The 2 other witnesses go in the bathroom. He gets down. The thing about this is he also ruins the table, or gets paint on the table here in a minute, because he's trying to get the paint can to work, and he goes back to the table where the sack is that you see, and as he's shaking it, it accidentally sprays on the table. Here's where he's, okay, I guess it just ends. And I threw in another video here. The bathroom sign was ripped off. These are different folks. These are a little bit older juveniles. He's just blatantly ripping off the sign and chucks it into the bathroom where his buddy is. So there's one witness, because his buddy comes out. Let's go down. It's usually when they're out of school. This is a little bit later in the evening. Let's go down to the tree shaking group, the video called Tree Shaking Group. So this is the tree that you heard about last week. This is a group, I don't know, there's probably 10 or so, 15 kids climbing up on this tree. Some of them are some of the same kids that you've seen doing some of the other things. This is a fairly long video. As the video goes on, more are climbing up the tree.
And the tree is actually meant to be a merry-go-round, and it can be climbed on, but the point of the tree is that it's supposed to go around and around and not what
You can
you're
see them
about to
shaking
see.
it back and forth. The problem with this video is it's going to be real hard to prove intent with this group. Now, this next video that we're going to show you, I think that we might be able to do something with. If you want to go ahead and go to the next video. This is an older teen, and it really looks like, you can see him at the front end of that video really shaking that.
So where this becomes problematic for us,
We had reported a cost to you all, not realizing the extent of the damage that was caused by this. So Mr. Mustine's about to give you some bad news.
unfortunate news. So where this becomes problematic for us is the way this merry-go-round is installed is very much like a flagpole. It has a centerpiece that's the frame that sleeves down underground into a concrete sleeve. So we have two problems that we have to address. And number one is if the frame is bent. If the frame is bent, the entire piece must be replaced. If the frame is still intact, but they've broken that concrete settlement foundation underground, we have to tear out a portion of the plate, the surface, rip all that out, re-pour that, and then reset the equipment. Worst case scenario, we're looking at $55,000 to do that if it's a complete tear out of the surfacing, the concrete foundation, and replacement of the piece. The manufacturers are expected to arrive some point this week to determine what type of damage that we have.
So in order to get to where we can present a case to the juvenile office, we have to go back and interview all of those kids. And when we go back to interview those kids, we're gonna be looking for some key phrases, which I don't really wanna talk about now while we're on YouTube or anything like that. But, so all of those kids that were on there at that one time, not all of them were trying to tear anything up, but we're gonna find out what they were hearing, what people were saying.
And we have started that process, right, Chief?
Yes, we have started that process. Last week, you heard that I brought up a couple of bathrooms where things were ripped off the wall. Well, we have interviewed one juvenile who confessed to breaking one of the soap dispensers. Just so happens that the same soap dispenser was broke at the same time as the changing table, which costs more money, but the kid doesn't know anything about that. And then the second young man that was with him, they basically said they're not going to talk to the police, so we'll present that case down the road to the Cass County Juvenile Office, and we'll work through their office to interview him, and that process takes a little bit of time. So anytime a juvenile is a suspect, we're going to probably take a formal statement from them. We're going to refer this. Referring a juvenile is the same as submitting a case to the prosecutor's office, like if it was an adult. So when we use the term referral, that's what we're talking about. We're just submitting a referral and the case associated with that referral down to the juvenile office for them to review and file in juvenile court.
When it gets down to juvenile court, Chief, what's the maximum fine?
So the maximum, I don't know what the maximum fine will be, but I will tell you what the maximum restitution will be. We might as well plan on $4,000. I've reached out to the Cass County Chief Juvenile Officer, Janae Barker, and she's very good. She listened to me. She knows that there's going to be several referrals, many referrals coming her way. And during our discussions, she had mentioned that, just an FYI, the max monetary that she can get back would be $4,000.
Is that by state statute or?
Yeah, I think so, by state statute for the juvenile.
So beyond that amount, for instance, if we do have this very bad news about the tree, beyond that amount, it becomes a civil issue where it's either going to be our insurance that we're turning it over, where there would be a deductible involved, or if it's bad enough, I think that we would probably be looking at turning Mr. Zur loose on somebody.
City sue the parents.
Yeah,
and,
that's,
I do have a question for you, Chief. Do you have knowledge of the majority of these kids or the witnesses that you have in video? Have you been able to establish that?
Well, no. I mean, it's a slow process. So you've seen as well as, someone made the comment that, there's other people out there playing and parents are out there. I can tell you, we've not heard from any adult about any damage, none whatsoever.
When you always say, see something, say something. I did that last summer, my grandkids at rec. There was a couple of teenagers on the one deal you hang on, and they climbed on the top. And I went over there and told them, you need to get off the top, you'll break it, and everything. And I told them they were getting mouthy and boisterous with me, kind of saying stupid stuff, and I just ignored them. So I said, we'll call PD. Yeah, you don't have no power. So I walked over, called 911. Within a few minutes, 2 cruisers come flying up. They saw that, they jumped, and they took off running across the park. But they went to the other park. You guys, our PDs knew where they were going, so you took off and they went and they caught them at the other park. I
So-
told them what they were wearing. So, I mean, see something, say something. I mean, that's,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we've been doing is, even though I said that we've not had anybody turn anything in or call in any information, we're gonna be able to identify them. They're all school-age kids. You know, we'll eventually be able to work our way through it, because not only do we have to interview the suspects, we have to interview all the witnesses. Just in case the suspects wanna say, it wasn't me, I wasn't there. Even if there's video, that'll probably still happen. However, another thing that things that we're looking at, before I move on to some of our remedies, I do want to share a little information with you. I'll give you some numbers of what we've been doing at the PD, and it's not because of the vandalism. This is just our normal. I went back to March 1st, so if I went back to the beginning of the year, all these numbers would probably double and triple. So since March 1st to noon today, the police department has conducted a total of 267 park checks, 26 vehicle checks in the parks, and 3 pedestrian checks. We check those year-round, not just, because of circumstance, but that's significant, and you can still see what's going on. Some of the remedies to help us maybe identify folks need be, our insurance carrier, NPR, Midwest Public Risk, they have a partner called WeTip. WeTip will help develop flyers to leave in your parks for them to text in a tip, and then that company will forward it to us. And the way I understand it is the insurance company will pay for a reward, and I sent out information. The information I got was that they'll pay up to $1,000. I don't know what their lower limits are, because I feel like we're going to be able to identify most of these kids. It's 100. And we're going to continue the park checks. We're identifying some cameras to send motion event alerts to the PD after hours from 2300 hours to 0600. We're still working on, the cameras, which cameras, and some other. It's pretty dark right up there, so I don't know at Hawk Ridge how those alerts will come in if they don't have a flashlight with them. There's still several things we're working through to identify which cameras we're going to use to send these alerts. You have anything on that?
No, I do have a list of, just to give you an idea of what we as the Parks Department do on a daily basis. Our routine park checks are minimized during the winter, obviously, because playgrounds and restrooms are closed. However, Hawk Ridge Park is checked daily, and TB Hanna, as they have restrooms that are year-round and not shut down. So just to give you an idea of some of the cost we're looking at, this doesn't include our man time, our man hours, but like I said, the flower percussion instrument is $6,400. That's usually a 6 to 8 lead time if it's in stock and doesn't have to be manufactured. So when a piece of equipment like that goes down, it's out for the season, is what we basically are expecting. After last Monday night's report, that Tuesday morning, the Optimus shelter was vandalized with the light fixtures ripped out of the ceiling. That's $650 per fixture. That does not include electrician's time to come out or lead time that we have. When we get spray painted, what we call getting tagged, we have a solvent that we use that's $100 a gallon, and we go through a lot of it, and it is time consuming and laborious, because it's not just like a paint stripper where it just peels it off. We have to be careful based on the surface that it's on and how to use that. The baby changing station is $300. One thing that hasn't happened yet this year, I'll probably jinx us on this, but several times last year, the zip line at TB Hanna, even though there's weight limitations posted on the equipment, it's nothing to drive by and see 3 or 4 kids, hanging on that and using that piece of equipment. Every time they go over weight, they sag that and they break the track and the bearings in those tracks. And that happened about 3 times last year. It's $200 per unit on each side, and each track has 2 units. The locks, I know Mr. Fearborn had reported locks on the swing sets at Hawk Ridge Park. To replace those locks, it's $150 a pair for the locks. The zipline chair, at TB Hanna Station, we've had 2 different instances where children who are too big to be in it have got themselves locked in it and couldn't get on it, couldn't get out, and they've had to call the fire department. And those guys cut that chair immediately. That's a $700 cut every time. And the equipment isn't like it's just in a warehouse. It gets shut down, and we're in a stall factor for most of the season when that happens. So that's just a brief summary of some of the things that we expect cost-wise when we come into work every morning.
So for remedies, we have 5 very specific items that we would like to bring to the council, and we would like the council's support. We don't necessarily have numbers yet because we're still working through details. Number 1, which was brought up at the meeting last week, we had actually ordered signage, but we pulled back on that order after some conversations that we had to get it a little bit more specific. But it is how to immediately report, or in the non-immediate situation you found it, how to get a hold of us in a non-emergency manner, but definitely emphasizing call 911 in those signs. We need to put up signage relative to how to use the equipment, for instance, and the tree being the example, and not, I mean, it would seem obvious if you're a 15-year-old, don't be rocking the tree back and forth. That's not what it's there for. But we think some signage would help us if it's up for a future prosecution. It was signed how you're supposed to use this piece of equipment. Apparently, we also need to teach people how to use spray cans, because that's not going over real well either. The other one, which actually is a pretty common sense one that we don't do, but the manufacturers probably have age and weight limits for some of these pieces of equipment. And we need to get those up on the equipment. From our liability standpoint, somebody too big to be in a zip line, we want to make sure that we've at least signed that same way we do with the skate parks. If the sign's not up, we only have ourselves to blame that we didn't tell somebody you're too big to be on this particular piece of equipment. So a lot of things relative to that. So those are the directions we're going with signage. Item number 2 is the chief had alluded to. We are going to go with motion sensor cameras. Some of the parks, some of the cameras that are in the parks currently, that's an easy thing with, okay, parks are open and closed at specific hours. If one of those goes off and PD gets alerted, and the sergeants get alerted and dispatch gets alerted on one of those, so we can respond. Going to get to that one. But some of them, as you saw from 3 of the instances of vandalism, the park's open. People are there. Those cameras we're going to be identifying specific ones that it needs to be beyond the park hours. This is a sensitive area. Any kind of emotion that sets this off, and what that motion looks like, sir.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Barber.
Yeah, back to the signage. I think it would be a good idea to place a sign where these, like the flower was vandalized, place a sign there explaining what has happened, and this has been vandalized. If if you see anything else, call. 'Cause a lot of people think maybe it just broke, but if they see that it's been vandalized, and a sign there says it's out of order because it's been vandalized, maybe they open their eyes a little better. We've seen those videos. There's parents in there with kids swinging their kids, and
Yeah, closed due to vandalism or something to that effect.
The
Closed temporarily due to
on
vandalism.
the swings too, that would be a good one.
Mr. Mills, did you have something?
On that, do you think maybe in our signage, we should put, $100 to $1,000 reward for information referring to the vandalism?
I think that we can get with WeTip and have them put up a sign that says if you see something and a possible reward will be given. I don't think you want to put a monetary value. Like some of these smaller incidents, the spray paint, the writing on the table, the signage that you see in them rip off, some of the videos that you haven't seen, the soap dispenser, and some of those items. I think we're going to get those identified, and I don't arbitrarily want to just, throw out money when we're going to get them identified. Now, if we're not getting there, then I think absolutely.
One of the things that's also really interesting is, and it was actually cut off of one of these, but when they were doing the writing on the table, one of the juveniles who was there, and this has also happened a couple of times at Rec Park, they absolutely know they're on camera. In fact, in the one that we cut short here at Hawk Ridge, he took a picture of the camera with his camera. And it's just, the reason for all of this is we got to do what we can to curtail them being so obvious about it. We're not doing anything, so it continues. So in addition to the motion sensor cameras, item number 3 is we're going to be looking into condor cameras at these locations, which is an offshoot of the flock camera. Same company, a lot more mobile, a lot easier to install, and a lot cheaper. So we may be coming, we will be coming to the council asking for a budget amendment to put a number of those in. That had been discussed, not the condor cameras, but more cameras in the parks had been volunteered by the council during the budget time. We think now we need to do this. In spite of the massive numbers that the chief gave, increased patrols, always, the presence is always a deterrent. And then, Councilmember, to your point, so lighting in the parks is a difficult thing, but we want to present it to the council as an option here. It's going to take some talking through, because how do we light the parks and not be invasive to the neighbors? And a lot of discussions about, a good example, Hawk Ridge Park. The fountain is lit at Hawk Ridge Park, and the sculpture is lit at Hawk Ridge Park. And when those first went in, we had complaints about the lights. Those are about as non-invasive as you can get. But we recognize that. So is there a medium that we can get to that is obviously secure? And the other problem is, and Mr. Musteen is already laughing at me, the other problem is that when we light, if we permanently light something, it invites people to go there. It's one of our discussions that the council's had about the trails. If we light the trails for security at night, are we inviting people to go and use the trails? But maybe motion sensor type lights, being very sensitive to the fact that any sort of lighting needs to point away from residential housing, so it's not invasive. But the council may see us coming to you with a plan on that and asking for your okay for it here in the future. I just feel like there has to be a medium between the ball field lights being on at night and that kind of lighting versus something that doesn't invite people in there but avoids what we see in that first video, where all we're seeing is the flashlights.
Is there something like a game cam that, because I know at the outdoor classroom at the high school, we had cameras set up out there so we could see what was happening. The teacher would actually bring in a deer carcass and put it in front of the camera to show what all kinds of predators were coming in at night. It was pretty cool. But they only, of course, go on when there's something there, and it's only night vision, so they don't have a light. Yeah. Yeah. That might be, I mean, I don't know if that's.
I mean, that's an option. The one thing about infrared is you want to be able to, the whole point of having a camera is to identify who's doing it. If you have infrared where you can't identify somebody, it's not gonna do us any good. It's just gonna show us, yeah, we can see better in the dark. We can see two figures doing things. I mean, there are some cameras out there that do a pretty good image at dark, in the dark, if they're close enough to the camera.
And we
as
will
far as
definitely be
game cameras.
looking into those types of options. The council will be hearing from us again on this one.
Mr. Mills?
Have we thought about reaching out to the school district and maybe doing some, just like we do with drugs and things like that and bullying, maybe do some education about, vandalism in parks and kind of get people to, other kids, they realize, hey, we need to report this stuff, just like they would if they saw somebody doing drugs or bullying or stuff like that.
I know that when our SRO is going out to some of the elementary schools, she has a variety of topics she speaks to a lot of the children about, and I think that very well could be one that's reinforced. I will say this, that, any of these kids gets charged with anything, that'll probably be also part of their punishment, besides probation, is certain types of classes, like, how not to vandalize something, other people's property type classes. And I would also say some of these kids that get referred to the Cass County Youth Court also get those as well. But I do believe our SRO could have some more conversations with the classmates, so.
So as far as from the Parks Department, myself and my recreation superintendent frequently go to, on an annual basis, I would say all but one of the elementary schools to do presentations on our inclusive playgrounds. It's part of their fourth grade curriculum. Part of that presentation revolves around vandalism and what they can do to help us take care of the equipment that we provide and how expensive it is. So I do recognize the fact that it's at a younger age, but if we can get them to understand that at a younger age, when it's, when they're in junior high and high school, maybe that lesson will have stuck a little bit. So we do do some presentations as well from the Parks Department.
After 27 years of insurance, the Missouri law for insurance on homeowners is very clear. Liability comes with the home's 100,000 or up. If you do vandalism outside your property, it doesn't matter where you're at. That person who owns that property has a right, once convicted, you find the juveniles to the parents, they can go right against that parent's insurance, file a liability suit for damage done elsewhere, and they will uphold that claim, and they will pay you money if you have the proof that they did it. The insurance policies are set up to do that. I went through a lot of those claims in 20-plus years with farmers, liability away from property, and they will pay. You have the opportunity, file the claims, get their insurance and file the claims.
Anything else?
That concludes on this item, sir.
You guys have anything else? Thank you. No further questions on this item? Okay, thank you, guys, appreciate the information. All right, the next item is a sign discussion. Having gone through the last election cycle, several of us got questions about issues that were going on, and I've asked staff to put together some information about it. A couple of council members have actually reached out to me as well, asking us to seek some remedy for some of the things that happened during the last cycle. So turn it over to Mr. Fearborn. He and his team have put together some information for us tonight.
Thank you, sir. The mayor mentions the last election cycle, but the fact of the matter is that worrisome, every single election, in one form or another, staff gets, and I kind of divide it into two different things. Staff either gets complaints that are just kind of complaints, or we get actual calls for action. You need to go out and do something here. Want to kind of divide this into, because it does come in two forms, want to divide the discussion with the council into two different areas. One is pre-election day, and one is election day, the 24 hours from 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock on election day. And those, The calls we get are very specific to those two timeframes, and they're a little bit different. It's kind of the period, so let's start with the period that leads up to the election day. It's further complicated now because very recently, state statute changed, as the council is aware, and you put out an election sign, 30 days before the primary, that election, and you're a winner, that election sign can stay up all the way through November. So we're talking about a third of the year where if a sign is a problem, the sign is a problem for a third of a year. So it's not like an overnight sort of a deal. And one of the other separations that's really not as much of a problem for us is residential. Again, when we're talking about the period that's leading up to the election, residential is residential. Most people know it is one sign per frontage, per candidate. That can get a little bit weird. For instance, myself, that actually means I can put 2 signs up because I've got Fox Ridge on the backside. My neighbor can actually put up 3 because he's on the corner house. But it is, the rule for residential is 1 sign for everything, is 1 sign per frontage per candidate. That's in place for that. But again, we don't get a lot of complaints about residential signs. So what we're really talking about in the area leading up to the election is the 3 rules that are in place. Again, 1 per frontage per candidate, no signs in the right-of-way or on city property, and you must have permission from the owner to put it on because you can't put it in the right-of-way, can't put it on city property. It's gonna have to be on private property, whether that's commercial or otherwise, and you have to have permission. And all of those cause problems for city staff, all of them, when we get a complaint. So just to kind of go into a little bit of detail, the piece of paper that the council gets, sir, if you don't mind. There you go, there you go. When a council member comes in and files, they get, and I've taken it out of the fancy letterhead, but these are the 6 pieces of information you get on placement of signs. Years ago, because it's so problematic for staff, years ago we moved away from sending these to all the candidates. We used to. And asking them if they'd like to come in and meet. Now it simply goes out locally with our council packet under the overture of, you're talking about your own code here. So we want to talk to you about your own code that you've adopted. Within there, you'll see that we have, and it's mostly for residential signage, the generalized statement where generally speaking, we're talking about 11 feet off the curb. If there's not a sidewalk or there's a goofy area, the problem with that is a very generalized statement, because when you get into the commercial areas that we're talking about with the time leading, and I've said that would absolutely apply to residential, where you're looking at the 11 feet. When you get into areas like Willow Wind and Dean Avenue and now the block property down by the car wash, it gets much more complicated because about every 15 feet it's different. And the reason for that is because the private lots don't come down to there. And if I could just for a second kind of take a break here and go through the picture. So this is actually the Google Maps picture from out in front of Willow Wind, which is always an area that we receive numerous complaints about every year. So you would think, okay, big sidewalk in the grass, these signs are okay to be there. They're not, because if you turn to the second page, you'll note this is the lot line. So the lot line barely extends just a couple of feet beyond the front of the parking lot, where you see the white line there. So those signs that are in the grass are actually still in the right-of-way, because the right-of-way extends up to that white line. In situations like that, and we'll get to it with the council, we're gonna be asking about, what do you want staff to do with this in an area like this? And there are a number of options that are available to the council, quite frankly. Dean Avenue, again, you see the obvious on the sidewalk here on Dean Avenue, where you would say, okay, can't put one between the sidewalk and the street. But in fact, when you turn the page, you'll note, and especially on the east side where the sidewalk is, that lot line is way deep. And so it is well beyond the 11 feet on the east side of Dean Avenue, and the sidewalk that's all patched there where you see it, it still extends to the hill. So in that first picture. So they actually, on Dean Avenue and up in front of Willow Wind, and the same thing, by the way, exists even a little bit deeper in front of the Block property, up by the Go Car Wash. We had a number of complaints on that property this time going back. So the 11 feet, while that applies and is gonna be good on a residential property, when you're talking about our commercial properties and Dean Avenue, and these are the spots where people put them a lot, it's not as simple as just measuring back with a tape measure 11 feet. The other thing is, from a strictly I supervise staff standpoint, is it staff's job to go out with a ruler and mark these, or is it the responsibility of the candidate to make sure that they're aware of this, and to what degree do we expand into the candidates? Should we be revisiting and going back to, everybody who's a candidate needs to follow the law in Raymore, and so we're gonna go back to, and I found out today the county actually does this. We'll get to that on the election day deal. The county actually writes every single candidate on some issues. It would be just as easy for us to do that going forward. We wanted to point out a couple of other areas where we,
Just a quick question. So if a candidate were to contact the property owner to actually get permission, the property owner should know where that line is, correct? So if you-
sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's
Okay.
kind of interesting there.
I mean, that would be one way to be more certain about putting it in the right place, is to actually have permission from someone to put it there.
Absolutely. And then if we had to have a discussion with the property owner about, hey, we did get, and we're actually going to be maybe making a recommendation to the council on the whole property ownership thing too, here in just a second. So the next picture is the roundabout, or the oval about. Again, very confusing. You see these lot lines on that northeast side, right up on the sidewalk. So putting one behind the sidewalk, you're gonna be just fine there, if you have the property owner's permission. Other side, you got this odd gap. That southeast side, way back, so you're putting one just fine on the northeast side. On the southeast side, you put it in the exact same spot relative to the sidewalk, and you're in violation of the code. And so, once again, whose responsibility is, staff is out there. It's one of the challenges we face, and we certainly face it here with commercial signs as well. By the way, staff actually picks up, we don't, I'll openly admit, up to now, staff has not aggressively, unless we receive an absolutely clear-cut, this thing's practically in the street sort of a deal, staff has not been, we do not enforce to the degree that we enforce commercial signs. Commercial signs, we actually pick up an average of 70 commercial signs a month around town. And we do that on a complaint-based basis unless Mr. Vogel, as he's driving to another complaint, happens to see one that is egregious, then he is out there picking them up. And of course, as the code indicates, we pick them up with no prior notification to the owner of the sign. Even odder, the last page in here, this is actually North Cass Parkway in Dean. Again, the northwest corner is kind of normal, although the sidewalk is actually in the lot line down there. But those east sides, you put the same sign in the same spot on these four corners, one of them's gonna be legal, three of them are gonna be illegal, according to the code. We are in control of this intersection. It's not MoDOT. A lot of people cheat the MoDOT sign deal. As you all know, you can see them everywhere where it's MoDOT property. But the our control of the intersection is actually about 45 feet to the west of the actual intersection. So all of these would be under our, and this is another spot where a lot of signs get placed because it's kind of out there in nowhere land. And then a lot of this gets a little bit murky when it comes to ownership. As an example, looking at this picture on the east side, so if someone were to place a sign in private property in the correct spot on that east side, out in front of there on the hill, they would actually have to ask the city for permission because the city owns it. That's a Chapter 100. So you can't put it on city property there. That's correct, sir. But there's, so again, there's all of these oddities that fall into this. Can we come to some conclusions on this? We certainly hope so. So when it comes to the period leading up to the election, there's kind of two areas that we could get to. On the one hand, we could do strict enforcement of the code. We're not telling people you can't have signs. We're telling people the code says you can't have a sign there, using Willow Wind as an example. And we would have, if we're going to strictly enforce the code, we have to do it to all the candidates. Everybody has to apply. It's the same rule for everybody. At Willow Wind, you can still have the sign, but you have to have the sign mounted in the parking lot, and you have to have the owner's permission. Owner's permission becomes a very difficult bear for the staff to get their arms around during this wrestling match. Owner's permission is not the owner telling a renter it's okay for you to tell somebody, I can put it out there. Owner's permission is not saying, from a liability standpoint for the staff and the city, owner's permission is not, I don't care if there's signs in the front of my property, because that will jump up and bite us in a heartbeat if suddenly that's taken back or the owner comes to us and says it's been misinterpreted. Willow Wind is interesting in that ownership, when that, I don't care if there's signs out in front of my property, isn't the same ownership. It's the same last name, but now the sons own that property. It's no longer The company that was going to put in the Chinese restaurant, that's now Mr. Christie owns the center lot. So who's the owner that's given permission of that? Because there's two property owners up there. Who does staff go and ask? Well, staff probably shouldn't have to go ask anybody, because that could take days. If we were gonna go that option, and again, we're not telling people you can't put your signs in front of Willow One, you just gotta put them in the right spot. And the grass is still the right-of-way of the city. Staff recognizes that this would be a major change in action. That's what staff does. We have to take those complaints. We're not telling people you can't put your signs out. Signs would have to be mounted in the parking lot. Ownership, we would create a form where that particular candidate or their representative, because 9 times out of 10, we're not actually dealing with the candidate, we're dealing with a representative of a subcommittee of the election committee, so we're way down the line. I doubt the president knew that he had a sign out in front of Willow End at any point in time. So it would be a question of having an actual form that is signed, this candidate is allowed to put a sign on my property here. Same thing down on the Block property. Same thing on the Dean property. Same thing on the properties that are adjacent to, except ours, that are adjacent to the Circle and that are down at North Cass Parkway. Those are really our 4 areas that we would be talking about here, but it would apply to everything. But these are the areas where we receive the most complaints on signs leading up to it. What would the council like to see? Staff will do anything you all come to a consensus and tell us to do. But what doesn't need to happen in this particular instance, there doesn't need to be a change to the code. It's a question of what we're gonna do, how we're gonna apply the code for 4 months of the year.
So I think the form is a great idea for a candidate to have a form that if I ask someone, can I put a sign on your property? Then it could be almost petition-like. They write the address, they sign their permission. So then if it's questioned, the city goes to the candidate and says, do you have permission to put the form here? Show me the signature. And that's all it has to be. You guys shouldn't have to chase down property owners. You should simply pull signs if they're not in a place where they legally should be. And if there's a question about permission, then you should follow up with the candidate. It is 100% on the candidate whether their signs are in the right place or not, whether they're putting them there or whether they have someone else putting them there. It's their responsibility.
To her point about showing the permission, maybe that's how they get their sign. The candidate that has that permission would be allowed to get their signs back after they've been removed, instead of, and then a candidate that didn't, they'd probably be disposed of, like all the other signs that are disposed of. But I don't know. That kind of to go with what you were saying.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Baker, Mr. Circo, whoever.
Okay, thank you. When it comes to the Mike Hill property, the 2 brothers, Mark and Mike Jr., Mike Jr. still has full 100% authority over that property. If it's given to him, he still does. When you talk to any of the proprietors there, that's who they deal with, Michael. And I know for over 20 years, the reason they opened that end up to, they have over 20 people, and they didn't want to upset any of their tenants. So they say, hey, you got a sign, you want to put them up, they're open to red, blue, and independent, they didn't care. But that's what it was. But, so this Michael still controls all that, Junior on that property, he still does, so Mark does. But I didn't know how much footage that was when you look at right here, the little green, there is grass there. Is it 2 foot? You know, it's hard to tell when you see the sight lines,
It's about 2 feet.
about 2 feet.
So they could put it parallel to the street.
I mean, if they had the small sign goes in, that 24-inch sign, they could put it right next to the curb, I
Right.
guess.
But of course, people are going to be going by at the prevailing speed of 48 miles an hour on 58 highway rather than the 40.
But, yeah, I say, but a lot of people just put the sign up, they leave it there for 30 days is because the name is out there. But, yeah, Michael will take care of that. I mean, he's still open to that because he doesn't want to have rifts between all his different renters and tenants.
Right.
Just,
Well,
but down here, I
again,
don't
though-
know what we'd find on the other end.
Again, though, what we run into, council member, is I don't care if they're out there is not, I'm giving permission for them to be out there.
Yeah.
And if all of a sudden he said, and we don't have anything in writing.
Okay, yeah.
So.
So, I mean, you want
we
to set
are-
up a deal with Michael that the Hales on that property, if you want to put signs, I know Congressman offers there with his, and he, during the last year, he had his thing for all the GOP signs. And that's kind of where the Trump sign come from, most likely Congressman Alford. But again, they didn't know. No, you know, over 20-something years, been putting signs up here. I have been, everybody has. And no one's ever said anything, really, about it. And that was always going, well, no one says nothing, so we didn't know.
And that's on staff.
Yeah.
Staff has never said anything about this. Staff gets complaints.
Yeah, to this, and then we see that. So, okay, that's what I was wondering.
Mr. Baker?
So I guess I kind of want to start off first that the assumption that maybe in my case I didn't have permission by a few people at this table obviously was wrong. You know, when I went through this and got an email from the mayor before the election, in a lot of my places I did have permission. So I want to start that off with that. Doing research on that, and I guess I'll ask Mr. Zur, the case Reed versus Town of Gilbert. This is the paramount case that if we are going to talk about this tonight, our current ordinance right now, we do not have, we have a content-based regulation, basically commercial and non-commercial. We have separate rules that apply to separate groups. The Supreme Court in 2015 said that political signs, religious signs, and directional signs cannot be treated separately than all the other signs and ordinances. They basically stated that we need to have a content-neutral ordinance. And many cities, Belton, Blue Springs, suburbs of St. Louis, many across the United States have adopted Reed versus Town of Gilbert in one form or another in their ordinances, just like we did a couple of weeks ago in a work session where, hey, we need to bring our ordinances up to current Missouri statutes. You know, I kind of feel this is going to be a sidebar of what happened or what's happening. You know, my question is, why are we discussing it now? What prompted this discussion? What changed this time compared to the last 20 years? The 5 years I've lived out here, signs have been in all these places without anything being communicated to me until this year. And me being in the only contested race, I felt that it was more directionally focused towards me as opposed to everyone else who was unopposed. But with that being said, when you go down to a content-neutral ordinance where you have to treat commercial signs just like non-commercial signs, that means either commercial signs have to be applied at the same direction of non-commercial, meaning that if we can only allow campaign political signs out for 30 days, the same rule would have to apply to commercial signs. I see that being a huge hindrance to real estate signs. When we're talking right-of-way, I mean, I've got a packet here, 50 photos, and this was taken yesterday and the day before in our town. These are all commercial signs that are in the right-of-way that are in violation. So, you know, it would go back to that, real estate signs. If a real estate sign could only be out 30 days because we had a content-neutral ordinance, what happens if a house is on the market and it doesn't?
Mr. Baker, if I could interrupt, we're talking about political signs. That's on the agenda tonight,
Exactly.
and that's what we're talking about.
And that's what I'm talking
So,
about.
I mean, I would even turn to our attorney to see if some of the interpretation that's already been espoused by Mr. Baker is accurate from your perspective.
I mean, he makes reference to the statute or to the case law is accurate. The application of it doesn't necessarily apply in this particular case. It's a different identification with regard to many of these signs, as far as the pictures I was able to see, many of which would be actually valid and viable within the city under our current code. We are enforcing our current code. That's what a staff is inclined or is instructed to do. Whether or not the council is inclined to change that code, they are open to do so.
If I may.
Sure.
The council may remember, relative to the council member's comment, we are actually in the process of updating the sign code at your request, and we're here tonight on one element of it. But in fact, as I had indicated, with the commercial signs that are being brought up, and we are talking about campaign signs, sir, but with the commercial signs that are brought up, if there is a commercial sign that is brought to our attention, it is immediately removed. If it is in violation, obviously. If it's brought to our attention, we remove it immediately. And again, we average about 70 of those a month, and there is no notification given. They're just pulled. Council may remember last year, we had what I call the Lazy Boy Weekend, where all of a sudden on 58 Highway, over 100 signs appeared, all in the right-of-way, like 4 at a corner, and myself, 2 members of the police department, and Mr. Vogel were out all of Saturday morning pulling them, and I actually drove them, to be kind, I drove those over to the Lazy Boy store that was being advertised in Overland Park. And they actually just now settled in court and had to pay a fine. But we do try to, and with the new code when it comes, which has to be, again, we're addressing the content neutral things, smiley face, all the way up to any one of the council members who has a neighbor who does not like them can actually have a derogatory sign pointed at their house 24/7, and we can't do anything about it. But again, tonight's, as you indicated, sir, kind of going on a little bit of a diatribe there, tonight is about during the election cycle. And it is not what staff is trying to do is acknowledge to the council that it is a much bigger problem than a single incident. We have these problems, and especially when we get to election day, we have these problems every single year. They come up. So all staff seeking is a resolution here.
Isn't there a separate section of code for temporary signs as opposed to permanent signs, as opposed to monuments? And then people have to apply for, if they want a 30-day temporary sign, they can like have those worms and stuff, or those banners, but they can apply for those. But those are totally different than permanent signs.
First off, no worm signs, please. You're correct. The sign code right now is divided up in the sign table that talks about different sign types and the zoning districts where they're permitted, and then the sizes and locations where they're permitted. Right now does differ between commercial and non-commercial, and then within the code there are different subsections for what's a permanent sign, what is a temporary sign. Under the temporary sign section, there are different types of temporary signs. Each of those has a different window in which they can be placed. There's different signs in our code that require a permit and do not require a permit right now. And so all those different factors exist that at the end of the day can be kind of confusing and frustrating for staff to implement. But in talking to Mr. Fearborn and Mr. Vogel, like I said, the code right now, the main rule is really the placement, in that we remove a lot of signs from the right-of-way. We don't really remove a lot of signs if they're too big, because that often doesn't happen. A lot of the signs that Drayton pulls are at intersections, they're in medians that the city maintains, they're at the interchange. It typically is the placement of signs. In most cases, if a commercial business comes in to put up a temporary event sign, they know that they have to get a permit. We have those relationships with the businesses, and they know what the requirements are. Those can be up for 30 days. You can have up to 4 of those per year. With those, we get a drawing of what the sign is, the size of it, the location of where they're going to put it, and we tell them before they order the sign or put the sign up if they're reusing it that the location is okay. Right now, the sign for temporary event signs is pretty restrictive in terms of the type of signs. And what I mean is you can't have the wacky waving inflatable arm guys. You can't have inflatable signs really at all without conditional use permit approval. you really are limited to a banner sign. We don't even allow the flag and quill signs like most businesses want to see. So as Mr. Fearborn mentioned, we did have the work session with the council some time ago to kind of talk about the Reed versus Gilbert case and how our code right now is not necessarily compliant. That has been a lengthy process to get our code to a spot that is compliant with it. And then the other thing that we've been trying to accomplish, we haven't had it yet, but we're trying to have I'll call it a town hall with some businesses, because we do get some pushback and frustrations about sign types that businesses want to see that aren't allowed. So not every business wants to put out a 4x8 banner. They may want to put out 2 flag signs.
Mr. Gress, I really appreciate your explanation on this. We're still trying to get back to political signs.
Correct.
Okay?
Sorry.
So, I mean, if you have a specific position on those and your code enforcement on that, I'd love to hear it, but
Sure.
let's try to focus.
So typically with the election signs, the code right now says up to 30 days prior to the election, and then after the election, a time frame for which they need to be removed. The time frame typically is not always an issue. It's typically the placement and the location and the number of signs on individual properties that we deal with. As the council's mentioned, we are generally pretty hands-off with that for some of the issues and situations it can create with my staff. Removing political signs, people get very protective over that, so we have just always been very hands-off. But as I mentioned, we do remove a lot of commercial signage for local businesses and out of Raymore businesses. So just seeking the direction on how to apply that a little more consistently.
If I could, Your Honor. Real quickly, just to follow up with Mr. Gress, with regard to private property and political signs, to my understanding, Mr. Vogel has not been actively seeking that out. It is really associated with whether or not any signs are in right-of-way at the end of the day. And there, it is not necessarily a question of commercial or otherwise. Any signs in right-of-way would be identifiable as a violative sign.
Mr. Barber?
Yeah,
I don't think Mr. Baker's done yet.
oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
Oh,
No. Mr. Baker, did you have any? Go ahead. Oh, okay.
I was going to say, you know, it looks like we have codes in place. I don't know, maybe some adjustment is being worked on with that, but my suggestion would be, when that happens, we enforce our codes. What our codes say, we simply enforce them. And just like you enforce the commercial signs, we enforce the political signs. And I think that makes it real simple. And if we hadn't done it in the past, shame on us. We need to do it now. So we've gotten, I think this, and I think not just this election cycle, but I think staff can say more and more of the election cycles, they're getting more and more complaints. And, you know, 15, 20 years ago, I don't think those complaints were coming in, but now they are. So I say enforce the codes. If we don't, then let's get the codes off the books.
Go ahead, sir.
And I will agree with Councilman Barber's statement that if we have codes in place, and don't get me wrong, if the codes say you cannot put political signs in these locations, we shouldn't do it. But we need to enforce the codes across the board, all signs. Not getting off on that tangent, but there's plenty of examples of you know, the codes not being correctly done. I will say that, like, this document that city council members get, if we're not handing this out to representatives in races, whether it's state level, nationwide level, county level, how are they going to know until they violate? And that would be a huge problem that, to me, in the conversations I had with Mr. Fearborn, I would not want to be in a situation where we're preventing someone to properly display a sign because they assumed we've done it in the past and we're going to do it again, and then they're told your sign cannot be put up again, and maybe they can't get permission from said individual. It's not as easy as, my question was, where all these lines come from on the map. You know, that is not readily available to the city that I know of. Even if you do the ArcGIS mapping from the county website, sometimes those lines aren't as exact, and I question these. Are these truly exact? Are these survey lines, or are they that?
These are near map GIS lines, sir.
Okay.
They're exact to a fact.
Okay. So in that case, as we're looking at that, you know, I think that the ability to contact a property owner, that should be upon the candidate, but are we going to create some recourse after the fact? And my comment was, if we get someone like a governor's race and we make it very restrictive here to put a sign up, you know, they're going to decide whether or not Raymore is worth fighting for. But I think if we do this, we've got to go across the board and make this uniform to what we're gonna do. I by all means, if the ordinance is in place, then we should abide by it. But, you know, I go back to what happened this year, why now, and why after 20 years are we discussing it? Because I didn't get an email 2 years ago, my signs were in the same place 2 years ago. A lot of people here had well, I'll just say 2 of us had signs that were potentially in violation at the rack, if you look at right of way, on the day of. And I don't know if we're gonna discuss the day of and how does the county perceive that as a public voting spot versus a public place. But I'll end it on that, and then we'll talk about day of, and I've got some things there for that.
Go ahead, Mr. Fearborn.
So, Councilmember Barber summed it up, I think, very, very well. And you have heard Mr. Zur refer to, you know, you have a code, trust the code, follow the code. With the council's okay, and again, staff fully acknowledges this will be a change. And if it's a change, it has to be a change for everybody, up and down the line, national level. And again, because of the 4-month thing, I mean, you all don't have to worry about a primary. At a local level, we don't have that. It's everybody else that has to worry, that we have to worry about the 4-month signs being up, which if they're up illegally for a third of a year, that is not a good situation. So staff would absolutely agree, if we're gonna do it, we gotta do it all the way. So unless we hear otherwise, I hear otherwise, it would be strict enforcement of the code, notification ahead of time to all the candidates that could possibly be running again, and we can take those from previous lists. We just want, and a serious campaign, just want to let you all know, following council discussion, here are the rules that are going to be applied to everyone moving forward. Here is the form for ownership permission that are going to apply to everyone moving forward. And again, that one, we really can, I mean, we could almost call that one the Willow Wind rule because of what's up there every single year and the back-to-back signs that are in there. And it's just a question of getting the proactive okay rather than the reactive don't care. But we would be applying to all of those. And again, with the emphasis on, we are not eliminating signs in Raymore. We're applying the code to where those signs can be and how big they can be and the size. And that, it's about as simple as that, follow the code. So unless we hear otherwise from the council, that would be the direction that I take staff in.
Okay.
Day of. So actually, Election Day is the day we hear more. Don't want to use any exact numbers here, but it is many more calls on election days, every election day, going back for years and years and years. And they are on a variety of things. And sometimes when we get them, we can't even believe it. But the topics are varied from where they're at on the property. We hear a number of complaints about signs that don't apply to the election day. And that has increased algebraically recently with they're not even up for election, they're up for election next year and they've got their election sign out in front of the property, trying to get advance notice out there, but having nothing to do with the election. Not acting on that is maybe more dangerous than a whole lot of things that are out there, because you could get a sign completely unrelated to the ballot issue but somebody's putting up there just because they know there's going to be traffic out there for 24 hours. We get complaints on the size of the signs that are out there if they're not just a regular election sign. Even though they're still within compliance, we get unreasonable complaints on that. We get complaints on the number of signs that are out there. So there's 3 polling locations in town. There's the Fellowship Church over by TB Hanna, and of course, then 2 city properties. There's the Rack, and there's Centerview. There has been a county change this year. So the county was very, very worried because they were getting complaints from the people that they were, the Fellowship Church being one of them. Fellowship Church said, unless you, county, put up a sign that says you can't have political signs on our property on election day, we're gonna pull your permission to use this as a polling location. So the county, I've spoken with the county, they actually received 9 complaints about that countywide. And so to keep in the good graces, because they're running out of polling locations, to keep in the good graces, they actually agreed in those locations that they would go ahead and put county signage up that you can't put signs on those 9 locations. Here, St. Sabinus in Belton, real bad one down in Archie. She had outlined all 9 of them to me. So that's a change this year with that coming in. What does the county actually have on election day? Because honestly, one of the ways we've gotten around doing anything on election day, like we've kind of looked the other way leading up to election. On election day, when somebody, if I get the call, it's, well, the county's in charge of the election and they take over the property for that day. It's not true. The county takes over 25 feet around the entire building and then into the interior. Everything outside of the 25 feet is still under the control of whoever owns that property. In this case, at the Rack in Centerview, the city. They have verified that if we enforce our rules, they're not gonna, they have no say in that. Obviously, they have no say in, but they're not gonna go pull for us. For instance, she said blatantly, if people had ignored and still gone ahead and put signs up at the Fellowship Church, that it would be the responsibility of the Fellowship Church to go pull those signs. In our case, if we were to strictly enforce our rules right now, on election day, they're not going to, they have no say-so and would not say anything about us going and pulling signs at the polling locations. But they're not gonna go pull them for us if we call them and say, by the way, there's a violation of our rules, because they don't control the entire property. Based on that conversation and just kind of thinking through the fact that this is actually more of a complaint than we get about all of the signs combined leading up to Election Day. Election Day is a mess. It would seem to me that the council has one of 3 viable options to direct staff on. Similar, we could continue to, as we have, which is an open violation of the code. We could, like with the period leading up, we could strictly enforce the code, do a city sign like what the county did, and put a sign up at noon the day before saying, no signs are allowed on this property, and then send Mr. Vogel out at 5 in the morning on election day, and if there's signs up, try to inform people. If there's signs up, we pull them out. Recognizing that election day is unique in all of this, and people get more excitable, There is a possibility of a third option, and that would be to amend the code for Election Day. And the amendment in the code would be that the city between 8 PM on the day before an election and 8 PM the night of the election, there will be signs allowed on city property that are polling locations only under the following conditions. And the two primary conditions would be that you would be, just like residential properties where they're allowed on election day, one per polling location. And then the second one would be that, what we discussed before, the sign has to be associated with an issue that is on a ballot. You can't have, I support left nostril inhalers out there when it has nothing to do with the election on a sign that's up. Would be just, again, offering the council an option of a third issue that would still allow for signs on election day at our locations, but it would require an amendment to the code.
Would you limit the size of that one sign?
I think we would have to, just from a space again, we get these complaints about the size of the signs, and the sign just happens to be two sizes bigger than a regular yard sign. And we get a ton of,
I only put one sign up, but it's 6 foot.
yeah. I got a little banner here.
Well, you have size limitations to what can go in a yard. So, I mean, it would just be the same. I mean, I think you would just use the same thing you have here, one per thing, and it has to be within those sizes.
But you're talking on city property at that particular point, so the city property can be different than what private property would be.
If the council were to go with the third option, I would limit it to one size sign, maybe slightly bigger than a yard sign, but if somebody put up a 16-foot square or 6 feet tall, they have now taken up the entirety of the yard at Centerview with their sign. So it would have to be fair to everybody and one size uniform for that particular date. Or smaller.
Go ahead, Tom. Well, I was curious now, like at Centerview, but you were right, the city controls how many signs, when they go up. The city does that at Centerview and Iraq. County's not gonna mess with that. But I was wondering, since there's two entries like in Centerview, on the Centerview, could they have two signs, one for each entryway? So if you got a double entryway going into the polling booth, could a candidate have a sign per entryway? We could actually, something like that, I mean, I think it'd be fair.
We can do anything the council tells us to. That'd be the frontage.
Two frontage areas,
Right.
so
Yeah.
if you use the same
Code, it's
as there, you have two frontage areas.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm not in favor of Amendment 3. I am in favor of enforcing the code as we would up to the point of election. Election day is not any special day to break the code. I say we stay with the code as is. You don't put up any signs. Now, I am assuming in that would mean affixing a sign or putting a sign on stakes in the ground. People could still hold a sign. That one would be okay with me. But no, they're not putting anything in the ground on city property with my vote. That's, if we're going to follow the code, we're going to follow the code with continuity throughout the year, in my opinion.
An individual can wear whatever sign with some exceptions, any sign they'd like on themselves and carry it around. There's no question about that.
I actually did wear a signboard for a bond election with the school district one time. Looked like I was out of the 1930s.
Not seeing a lot of consensus here on any of the three opportunities to talk about. I think, from just what's bring attention, Don, let's be honest. You had like 30 signs up out there. I mean, it was over the top, bud. And it drew a lot of attention, which is what you wanted, but it was a little over the top. And I think that's what's brought some of the attention to you. Plus you place some on city property, some in areas I know you didn't have authority to, like on the Jake Lovelace's property along Dean. So there were areas that there were violations of the code, and I think that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So, how do we tighten it up? Let's tighten it up so that we all know we're doing the right thing when we put signs up.
And I'll say that, I mean, obviously, in a professional campaign, you're going to do what it takes to win. In the case of like 2 years ago, we had, I don't know how many people were running for school board. And I think that if we limit one sign, I mean, who is going to be in charge of policing multiple campaigns throughout the city? And one, just informing of it. I mean, we have, I guess, a 2-year window until the next April, well, 1 year until the next April, then the school boards will run in that. But, I mean, the day of the election, I just, to me, when we do elections in April, we have a 10% turnout. I think the more we crank down on this, the more we're going to suppress voters, the more we're going to suppress information, the more we're going to suppress our people being informed that, one, there's an election, which a lot of people didn't know there was an election even, which is sad. The fact that we had less than 10%, which is what we normally run in April, I think we could do better as a city to inform. I mean, I did everything I could between a website, signs, door knockers, getting out to talk to people. I mean, those are all things that you need to do if you want to win an election. But I think the more we limit the day of, I mean, who's to say? I didn't know you could have put out 40 signs that day. Mr. Townsend could have put out 40 signs. I mean, I didn't know what people were putting out. I just knew from my campaign what I had set aside for Election Day on purpose because that was the last day.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I gave you an email. You just now acknowledged that you got it. Or if you had any questions, Mr. Fearborn was available to give you any details with regard to staying within the code.
But you put 3 signs out there at the
I did.
In city right.
I didn't have an opponent.
I know,
It was
but-
on city property too.
Correct.
And it was under my understanding. So what makes his right and I'm wrong?
That's what I'm saying.
Neither one of us.
Yeah.
Neither one of you were right.
Exactly.
Based on your letter,
So
you
let's-
sent out the letter and you still put your signs. where
On
they
election
shouldn't have
day. Everybody puts signs out on election day,
been. That's what Don's trying to say.
but not 30 of them. I mean, it's a
Many years
bit of an
nobody did,
overkill.
Nobody said anything.
That's
I would
what's
remi-
bringing attention to it.
And I would remind the council to get the attention of the chair before, so that we don't so that this does not turn into a debate.
Sonia?
So back on topic, I would be in favor of either keeping it as is or limiting the number of signs. I think Jay has a good point. Let's just keep it as is, and that makes it easy. Makes it easy. I mean, it's a change, so it's not going to be easy the first year, but ultimately for you guys, it makes it easy. You don't have to count signs, you don't have to whatever. It's, if there's any sign, it gets pulled, period. And that makes it simple. Just like from the beginning election season, as we're coming up, we follow the code. This is what the code says. It will be enforced. It will be hard. I guess my one question is, especially in the first year, and I know we haven't done it before, but have you thought about what would fines look like? People would get any warnings? Part of my question and part of my point last week was, as leaders in the community who make the rules, we are responsible for also following those rules. So not a matter of I'll do whatever it takes, but I will follow the rules and the result will be as it is. So, the waste on city staff time in having to enforce these rules on people who are supposed to be the leaders in our community is what really irritates me. And it just isn't right from a leadership position. I can assure you all that as long as I've been a person running for council, what is this, 13, 14 years? It's been an issue. It's one of my, as I shared last week, one of my big pet peeves. You know, as a person who makes the rules, follow the rules. Just follow the rules. So, with all of that said, will there be fines for people who don't so that it can help to make up for if we have to hire extra staff to pull signs in our first couple of years while trying to enforce this?
I would recommend if the council does go with the, and by keeping it the same, I assume you mean keep the code the same, don't amend the code, but enforce the code. It is a change, as I have acknowledged to the council. This would be a drastic change. And so we would have to go overboard on informing folks and getting notifications out to all the levels this time so that they knew. Council may remember, we didn't even check our own selves on the landfill deal, and we got in trouble with the City of Lee Summit for where we put some signs, and we didn't get fined, but they were very, very quick about taking the landfill signs down. So it is a complex issue. I think we would enforce it in the exact same manner to start with, to see if we got compliance. It'd be the first year. We would enforce it the exact same way that we enforce the commercial signs. We would be out, and obviously we can be very targeted on election day. We have 2 locations we have to go look at. And we would put up signage ahead of time that you can't put up signage. And then we would just simply, at 5 in the morning, go remove the signs. If somebody put one back up, we'd go remove them. In the first year, when we are removing signs, we would be, where possible, saving those signs and making phone calls. Moving forward after that, then we would simply be, as the code indicates we can, and because we would be sending this out to all candidates or their committees, we would be holding them for the first year, and then after that, we would simply be disposing of them if they were improperly placed.
Just to follow up, holding them the first year to a point, if you've picked up 20 signs, then enough already. I mean, do you get to a point where you've maxed out?
We put them down in the window well, and we make a contact, and we give them X number of days to come and get them.
Mr. Mills?
2 points. One, I would support the amendment on Election Day. I think Councilman Baker made a very good point, and I know for a fact, because I've had people that have literally contacted me because they were driving by the polling place and saw signs out. And it's like, oh, do we have something to vote on today? And I think that helped us with our law enforcement sales taxes. Again, I think it got people out to vote. And so I think allowing the one sign and having a certain size on Election Day, I would support that because I think it does help bring awareness for voter awareness to get people out. Secondly, as far as fines or things, to me, I think that would be more imposed for that habitual person. So let's say you pulled their signs and then you turn around and put them right back up again. Then I think that could potentially be a fine. But just because they put them wrong the first time, I don't think we would fine them. But if they turn right around, you took their sign down 3 times that day and they kept putting one back up, I think we should have the ability to fine them.
And there is a remedy for that. It's not actually a fine, but it goes to court. Again, the Lazy Boy case.
And by the way, if you're talking about them going by and the voting poll and seeing the signs, the county does put out a sign that says vote here as well. I would think that would be what we call police work a clue.
Right, but it also lets them know what things are, if there's something on the ballot. Because sometimes just because vote here, a lot of people don't realize, and if they see signs, a mayor, a councilman, a school board, hey, there's something, maybe I do need to stop and vote. So I think it does help improve voter awareness, and more people we can get to vote. And I think one sign per candidate is not gonna overtax anybody.
Mr. Circo.
I agree with Councilman Mills, Councilmember. I think one sign on one sign, Terry entry, fine. I mean, you're only talking, you're going from overabundance of signs over years to now 0 signs. I think, but one sign, that couldn't hurt. Candidates have one sign entry here. If you got 2 entry, you have a sign up, that's it. If you want to hold a sign, that's 3. I don't think that'd be a big problem to have just a few signs. Kind of ease it in from what they're used to, I know.
Anybody else? Got an opinion on it? Go ahead.
I'd say just enforce the code. Professor Moorhead taught me the code back in the day, and I kind of tried to stick to it. I got yelled at by a person in my neighborhood one time. Jim was probably involved.
Mr. Barber.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Councilman Burke that, don't change the code. We've got the code. Let's just enforce what we have. I don't buy the argument that it brings people to the polls. I've had 5 elections. I had a couple of them contested. I pull the voter data every year. There is a certain number of people that vote in these April elections, and it's kind of like, you don't have to tell them it's an election day. It's like people going to church. You don't have to say, hey, that's where we go to worship God. They know. They don't miss a Sunday. These people don't miss an election, and I don't think signs make any difference in changing that. And I think it's just gotten a little out of hand, and I think if we allow that one, then we're going to see abuses. It'll be more than one, and then staff's going to have to go in there, and it just, don't allow them. Just say no signs.
So I'm hearing difference of opinions here. So is there a way for you, when you do bring the sign changes to us, that those options can be laid out where the council can vote on those as particular amendments or additions?
There's a significant, I agree with you, sir. It sounds like there's a significant difference here. We're actually going to be bringing no changes to you all. It is simply enforcing the code. In light of the conversation here, what we could do is bring an ordinance with the single amendment to allow for the one sign per frontage, and simply let the council vote it up or down.
Okay, why don't we do that? I think that's fair. All right. Anything else?
That concludes the conversation on this topic, sir.
All right, does anybody else have anything to add here on this? We do have a reason to go into executive session, so I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session for real estate, or not real estate, litigation.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman,
I move that we move into executive session to discuss litigation matters as authorized by the revised statute, State of Missouri 610.021 subsection 1.
thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move into executive session. Kind of a roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Present. Oh, yes, okay. Oh, because we're going into session now, sorry.
Yes.
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 All right, we have 7 yeses. We'll now move into executive session, and we'll wait for the folks to leave. We'll just stay here.
May we take a
Oh, okay.
2-minute bathroom break?
Sounds good. Yeah,
Or
he's got to turn off the